this video I go over some of the measurements for the custom cargo space for the WK2. If you're new to the channel, I actually have another video where I do the build for this. This video is in response to some of you subscribers who wanted a little more detail on some of the measurements, so hopefully this will take care of it for you. And feel free to skip around on this one. I basically go through taking it apart, and then I just put a tape measure to it so that you can kind of get an idea of some of the dimensions. And then I put it back together. It's really quite a simple process. The first thing is detaching the gas struts, and then coming around to the back. When you fold down the seats, it's just a matter of popping the hinges. There are two of them, one on either side. The nice thing about these hinges is that they're spring-loaded, so when you put these back in, it makes it a lot easier. The hinges kind of want to pop in place. And once the gas struts and the hinges are disconnected, it's just a matter of pulling the drawer system out. That's one unit. And here's what it looks like without the drawer. You can see the base there. And so then to remove the base is also real simple. It's these two bolts here up front, and then around the back we've got the two nuts that actually hold the rear seat down. You got one on either side, and once those are out, that's it for the frame that holds the base, and you can just go ahead and pull that one out. And those are the two pieces. So here's a look at it, and I'll throw some measurements on it. So the outside is essentially the shape of the factory board that's in there, and then I cut out the interior portion to just taper. And essentially that could be whatever size that you want it to be, as long as the outer dimensions are right for the fit. The inner dimensions aren't as important. They can't be too thick, otherwise the gas struts won't clear it. So I tapered down there to about 1 inch at the end with the wood, and then with the rug on top of it, it gets a little thicker. And this is the back side. Some of this I just used some wood I had lying around, and then some plywood. So I made this front portion of it, I don't know if you can tell, but it's 2 layers. So it's a piece of plywood, and then it's got some solid wood on top. And that's one of the bolts that holds it down. So there are different ways to do this. These little metal braces here I took off of a set of drawer hinges, the same ones that are on there that slide. This is the inner portion. I had an extra set, and so I plopped those on there to give it a little bit extra rigidity and strength, particularly when that plywood was only down to 1 inch. So again, there are a few different ways you can do this. These were just some L brackets I bought at the hardware store, and I made that bottom hole just a little bigger to fit the rear seat bolt. And I apologize, some of this footage is a bit shaky. It was a little tough using the tape measure with one hand and trying to film with the other. So this back brace was just a old piece of L-shaped aluminum, and those brackets from the hardware store. I put some of that gray stuff is a epoxy that I put on there just to hopefully reduce some of the flex, since with those gas struts there's quite a bit of push and pull on it. So that was the frame that the drawer sits on. And then here's a little look at the drawer system. And again, there are endless ways you could customize this. The main thing is that you've got that base to attach it to. Then as far as how tall you want it or how deep you want it, whether you want one drawer or two, or doing it like a table setup like mine, it's really just up to your imagination and I guess what you plan on using it for. I ended up using solid wood for this table portion. I had an old tabletop. I'm not exactly sure what type of wood it is, but it was a fairly hard wood, fairly sturdy. So I went with that instead of plywood. But I would assume if you get a good quality plywood, it could work. Solid wood obviously is better since you're screwing into the sides of it to get that hinge on there. I assume something that's not a laminate would probably have a little bit more durability there. So if you can do solid wood or some other material, you might be better off than using plywood for that portion of it. And the mat on top is actually just a floor mat, some foam. It helps to reduce noise and movement when I have my camping gear back there. I was a little concerned as to how it would hold up, but so far, so good. So here I take apart the box portion of it just so you can get a better view of it and a couple measurements. It's basically just the width of the old board. The first attempt I made at this, I actually used the board that comes with the vehicle. The problem was that because of the material that it's made out of, it really didn't have the strength to hold the hinges. So I ditched that and went for plywood instead and just rebuilt it, but essentially with the same dimensions. I think I mentioned it in the other video, but the reason for most of those cutouts was really weight reduction. And then the crossbars that you see there were from an old roof rack that I had that I put in there to give it a little bit more strength. So depending on what you have, if you just use the solid wood, that would work too. And it depends on how much weight you plan on loading it with as to whether it would be strong enough. But doing the cutouts on the sides and the front there just removed some material to reduce the weight as much as possible, but still keep it strong enough for my purposes. Here we have the brackets that the frame bolts down to in the front. I apologize, I forgot to get the footage of when I removed those, but you can see when I put them back toward the end where they go. This is one of the trickier parts as far as the angles to get that top sitting flush. If I do end up making some sort of a bracket kit for this thing, this would probably be the piece that I would start with. So I'll keep y'all posted if it ends up being something that I can do. So to get the top of these to sit level, essentially this cut down here needs to be about 2 degrees. This one in this direction, and this one in this direction. And then this cut here from the level needs to be about 27 degrees. So if you cut that at a couple degrees and then put the bracket flush to the bottom, that'll give you that angle. So it'll look wonky here, but that's what allows this part to be level. Those are rough estimates. I mean, they work for me. I don't know that they're perfect angle. It's kind of difficult to measure, but if you at least get that much angle, you should be able to get it flat enough to sit well. So this is where the vehicle slopes. It slopes in toward the vehicle, and then it's also curved. So in order to get that top portion to lay flat, you need those angles. And essentially for the top, it's roughly 27 degrees, and then roughly 2 degrees for the this slope here. So this is where I drilled and threaded into the side of the vehicle to put the mounts for the gas strut. So if you get the bit and the threading bit, it's really not that hard to do, and it's been holding up well so far, so I'm happy with it. So from there, it's just a matter of putting it back together. Bolting on the brackets, placing the frame, bolting that down to the brackets, and then the bolts, the rear seat bolts, plopping the hinges back in, and then reattaching the gas struts. And that's all there is to it. Oh, and if you decided to do the lighting, then there's the reconnecting of the switch. That, for those of you that are interested in that portion of it, one of my other videos has a little bit more detail on how I set up and installed the battery system that runs these lights, as well as my the water pump for the water system that I have installed.